So I want to first of all thank Samantha for holding it down, getting us going here, and the introduction. And I want to thank everybody tuning in around the country. I do see people from all over, and I want to thank and welcome the people here in the room with us in New York City, the New York City chapter of Refuse Fascism, members of the Revolution Club and Revolution Tour, members of the of the National Office of Refuse Fascism, and we're really glad you're here, new and old. As Sam said, this is our first weekly webinar since we did our 5-week launch of the OutNow movement, 5 weeks of consecutive protest to bring the demand the Trump-Pence regime must go now into the public square and build the kind of momentum and model the kind of resistance, ongoing, sustained protest that it will take, but on a much, much bigger scale than we've yet been able to establish, to drive the fascist Trump-Pence regime from power. And since then, we had mass organizing meetings around the country. Over 250 people came together to strategize on where we're at and how to take this forward. And this is our first chance to come back as a national movement and talk live across the country about where we're at and what we're facing. And so we have big plans. I think I will mention only briefly. Andy will talk more about them, and I will talk about them again at the end. But we have big plans for December. As Samantha said, there is no Santa Claus, and he will not remove Trump and Pence. We need December disruptions. It's on us to drive this regime out. And what are we disrupting? We're disrupting the advance of fascism. We're standing up against it. And we're disrupting the normalization, the collaboration that is really also advancing very rapidly. Both of these things are advancing, and it's heading towards a real catastrophe for humanity. And we have got to wrench society and the people onto a different path. And this is what we're going out through the month of December, disrupting in different ways. And the centerpiece of the month is mass protest December 14th, where we really bring back into the streets everybody who joined us for the first 5 weeks, as well as many, many, many others. People who don't yet know about this movement, people from other organizations and movements, people from religious congregations, where we gather them together and we manifest on a bigger scale. And this is a week and a half away. So we're gonna talk about this. And this Saturday, we have a big day of mass protest, disruptive protest to spread the word on public transit, which we will also talk about December 7th around the country. So there's more we'll say about the plan, but I wanted to have this in focus as we talk about what we're facing. And the heart of the program today is gonna be a conversation, a presentation and question and answer with Andy Zee, who, as Samantha said, is a co-initiator and founder of Refuse Fascism and a spokesperson for Revolution Books, and somebody who has done a lot of work on this question of the character of the Trump-Pence fascist regime, the nature of fascism, what we're facing, and why and how, and actually played a big role in developing the strategic approach of Refuse Fascism and talking about the plans we have in front of us. So with that, I want to hand it over, let you say what you have to say, to set some parameters out, set some information for people to respond to, and then we'll take questions from people watching, and we'll take questions from the room.
Okay, so, all right, well, hello everyone. And we do see that tonight's question and answer on what is fascism, what are we facing, is got to be looked at in the context of what Sansara just said, a month of disruptions, December disruptions, we called it. And, you know, I think there's one of the really good things is that recently a number of new people have gotten involved in the OutNow movement. Some people have gotten involved in Refuse Fascism that has initiated this. And so I feel that tonight we can do some basic orientation on what it is we're facing and why does that matter for what we're actually trying to do. I just will read briefly. There is on our website, there's a lot of resources on the refusefascism.org website for people to actually get into our plan, our strategy, and our analysis, including there's a plan for the month of December. That is, as Sansara said, there is no Santa Claus, and he won't remove Trump and Pence. December disruptions, Trump and Pence out now. And it's a proposal for advancing and building the OutNow movement. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of this overview, where it says that December will be a highly charged month that will present both the necessity to speak out and to act in response to breaking events, and the opportunity to advance the OutNow movement, as this is the one program that could actually remove the Trump-Pence regime from power. One, the impeachment of Trump will be moving to a new stage, and as you know, that's already switched to the Judiciary Committee now in the House, with a sharpening conflict at the highest levels of government. Two, there will be a ratcheting up of outrages from Trump and the regime, and we've seen that virtually every day this week and every week. And three, there will be increased focus on the Democratic primaries that are coming up in early 2020, early February, which divert all too many people from actively confronting the sharpening situation with the intensification and consolidation of the Trump-Pence fascist regime in power. So this is, and we're going to get more into later on what the, sorry, you're halfway off the screen here.
I'm
there
here.
you go.
I'm taking
okay.
some notes.
She's
as you
taking
speak.
notes. Okay, but
Go ahead.
still,
I'm here.
you know, need to be here. Okay, so I want to get into, in this first part of the discussion, we say all the time that the Trump-Pence regime is bringing a catastrophe. If they succeed in consolidating fascism, it will be catastrophic for humanity. I want to talk about why does that matter, and is it true? And secondly, we say the Trump-Pence regime is a fascist regime. That's what Refuse Fascism says. That's the name of our organization. And one of our key slogans is that in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Well, what is fascism, and why do we say that, and why does that matter? So we're going to mainly focus in this first part of the discussion on what it is. What is the catastrophe? What is fascism? Then we're going to move into the December disruptions and some of what's holding people back. But before I begin here, one of the things holding people back is that they don't really believe it's a catastrophe. They think it's bad. They think it's the worst. It's never been terrible. How did this narcissistic, psychopathic lunatic get to run my country, people think. And they're disgusted by it. Millions and millions of people feel this anguish. They feel dread for the future, but they're not doing what needs to be done. Why not? Well, yeah, I mean, there's reasons like people believe, you know, their lives are relatively comfortable right now. They haven't been hit by the immediate effects of fascism themselves. People are mainly focused too much in this society and the selfie culture on themselves. They believe that, how could it happen in America? We're the good guys after all. All these kinds of things we can talk about. But I want to focus right now on the fact that people don't really get what's going on, what's already happened, and what is going to happen if this regime is not stopped, and why it is with fascism that it can become too late to stop. Why it's not just the worst swing of the pendulum, not an unbelievably unimaginable Republican regime, but nonetheless, there's light at the end of the tunnel if we just elect a Democrat in 2020. And of course, that is even a question whether you'll be able to really do that. We already know that you're in a situation now where basically 30% of the people select the president for the other group of people due to the voter manipulation and all this kind of gerrymandering and things like that, and as well as the setup of the Electoral College. But I want to get into this a bit. This is a catastrophe, and most simply put, because it's a fascist regime that's bringing a fascist form of rule. And because this country is the most powerful country in the world, that means it has repercussions all around the world and portends a great horror for humanity. And that's something we have to really grasp very deeply. What they've done already is a tremendous catastrophe for people. Hundreds of thousands of people are already affected by this in ways that are very palpable. Because, you know, we talk about a fascist regime. It's not just Trump. It's Trump and Pence. It's Barr. It's DeVos. It's the whole. It's the whole cabinet is a cabal of very fascist-minded people. Half of them, or a little more than half, are actually what we call Christian fascists, a movement that's grown up in this country. Well, its roots have been in the country since the beginning. It's grown up in a virulent way since the late 70s. And it's a movement that's a highly political form of Christian fundamentalism that aims to remake America into a theocratic Christian state. And this is not something that's incidental. This is, or just words, or just another thing that's just an insult, but this is very real. The Attorney General recently gave a speech, I think it was at Notre Dame, where he actually talked about that the fundamental basis of law is fundamentalist Christianity in the Bible. That is actually the arbiter of justice. This is in opposition to what the, on paper at least, and actually in actuality has been the ruling class consensus in the US Constitution and in law. And while there's many instances of it being violated, essentially that separation of church and state is held. This is an attempt to change this. This is a response to changes in the demographics, changes in the culture, changes in the world, contradictions and problems that the system has run into. There's a section of people in power who for some time have determined that we can't go on, or they can't go on as they have been before. And they are cohered in a movement that is all the way up into the military, in our police forces, in every branch of government. It's in state houses across the country. And they're moving not just at the federal level, they're moving at the state level. And you can see this very clearly in relationship to abortion rights, where essentially there aren't abortion rights in about 99% of the counties in the United States at this point. But it makes a big damn difference if this is at the seat of power in the executive branch. And another thing they're trying to do, and they are doing, is ripping up what have been a consensus, a political norm, and a constitutional norm of the separation of the different branches of government, separation of powers. This is also being changed. But I want to come back now to the catastrophe, because there's things that have happened to immigrants that are extraordinary. When you say, well, how could it be fascism? That's a good question. How could you have fascism when you have 80,000 people in concentration camps on this side of the border, almost as many now in concentration camps at the other side of the border, as well as at the Mexican border with the countries south of there, all fomented by the US government, when you have children separated from their parents, and why that continues in violation of court decisions, when you have at the same time the children and families being kept in cages. This is, and then you have to go look at, well, what about the 10 million people who live here and don't have papers? What kind of terror is there in those communities? What measures are people taking? Are you thinking about that? And see, if you're not outraged by this, you're not paying attention. And we've said this 2 years ago here. If you are not as outraged today as you were the day after the election, then don't go saying, how could the German people have let fascism happen there? Because that's what's happening here, and it's happening right now. Now, look, I could take easily the full half hour and the next 10 hours to just chronicling all the things they've done. But when we say it could be a catastrophic future, that's not a joke. People know, and young people in particular, are very concerned about the environment. They understand that it's not that many years we have left to be able to try and reverse climate change that could potentially lead to the extinction of the human species. But with the Trump-Pence regime, they have already taken measures, and that cannot be easily reversed, and maybe not even be able to be reversed. But should they be able to continue for the next year and then past 2020, which is a very distinct possibility, just by the way, you could be in a situation where it is irreversible and the human species could be lost. And that's not the only existential question like that. Trump has said, and we cited this in the very beginning, that if we have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them? And he did all this bluster with North Korea. And as you might have seen yesterday's pictures, the leader of North Korea just got on his white horse and got his military on their white horses and rode to their historic founding mountain, and essentially what's to be a signal for this playing footsie with Trump may be off the table now, and they're going to continue to arm as they have been. And then what is Trump going to do? Then you have the situation in Iran, which Trump has also been taking measures that are exacerbate that. But see, where he's not worried about coalitions, he's not worried about getting support. They have a different way of going at things in the world, which is a full assertion of American power. So these are two existential questions. Now, I just want to speak briefly about what is fascism and then open it up. Refuse Fascism put out and still has it on our website. It's our mission statement, if you will. It's a call to action that was issued in 2018. And it's still quite relevant for our program and for its understanding of an American fascism. And this is what it says. For those who haven't seen the flyer, I'll put it up here nicely in front of the screen. There you go. But it says over here, an American fascism. We must not reassure ourselves that it couldn't happen here. It is. Trump's Make America Great Again is a 21st century fascist program of manifest destiny, America First wrapped in the flag, and Mike Pence's Bible taken literally, with a program of white supremacy, misogyny, and xenophobia. Xenophobia is the fear and hatred of foreigners, of the other. This regime denies truth and objective evidence, and yet it has its hands on the most powerful military and nuclear arsenal in history and is preparing and threatening to use it. Millions of immigrants live in terror, fearing their loved ones will be ripped away. People's humanity is viciously denied. Women are poised to lose the right to abortion. Trump and the then Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and Attorney General Barr is even worse, have instructed the police to take the gloves off. In fact, I depart from the text here, Barr yesterday, I believe, or the day before yesterday, gave a speech to police in which he said, if you don't treat the police with respect, we will remove the police from your neighborhood, which is to say that we're going to let crime, we're going to foment crime, which is what they do anyway when they want to get things going and rivalries between different sets and whatnot. We'll remove the police and then see how you like that. This is a direct threat, and it shows that what it is they're actually trying to do, which is to terrorize communities to be able to further terrorize them. And see, what has been a slow genocide against Black people in this country through mass incarceration, police murder, not just Black people, Black and brown people, could become a much faster genocide, and indeed will become that under the Trump-Pence regime, should they get elected to another term or seize that next term. Don't forget that it's a small world now, and there's a fascist in power in India named Modi. And when he won his second term, overnight they denied citizenship to over 1 million people. See, this is what you have to look at. This is what's coming. And they've actually told you it's coming. Yeah. And they tell you over and over again, but you don't want to look at it. But back to the text of what is an American fascism. So Trump and Barr and Sessions have instructed the police to take the gloves off, further brutalizing people of color. LGBTQ rights recently won are now under assault again. Damage done to the environment by the regime in just 14 months, and now you could make that 36 months, could be irreversible. Now here's the important paragraph here, or the most important. Fascism rules by organized repression and terror by the government. Civil liberties are stripped away, laws rewritten, dissent criminalized, the courts packed with fascists, and the separation of powers and of church and state ultimately eviscerated, which means torn up. As part of radically remaking society, the Trump-Pence regime must sharply attack those in positions of power who oppose them. Fascism also mobilizes mobs of vicious thugs, as we've seen, Nazis marching and murdering in Charlottesville, Virginia. We've seen it in mass murders happening around the country against people of color. We've seen it in attacks on Refuse Fascism, particularly in LA, where they came out to Santa Monica, and some of these thugs sprayed protesters with bear repellent, and they hung up death threats in a park of a veteran who's a member of the Revolution Club there and a member of Refuse Fascism around the trees, and also scattered flyers with the same kind of thing against myself and the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian around the park where Refuse Fascism was to protest. So there's a relationship between the mobs and the regime. The mobs are unleashed by the regime being in power, and in some cases commanded by them. And on the other hand, they operate also independently, but are part of an overall movement to rip away rights and to terrorize the people. Now, it's important to say that the Trump-Pence regime has not yet been able to implement their full program, but they are advancing. And we said in 2018, it might only take a single serious crisis, international or domestic, for this regime to drop the hammer. And we say, don't normalize, don't accommodate, don't conciliate, don't collaborate. People all over the world are counting on us to stop this nightmare. And the different strains of fascist demagogues and movements of this country are seen in Trump and Pence, their last chance to achieve their reactionary program. They will not listen to facts or reason. They've already and will continue to change the rules, manipulate elections, and they will not give up. So this is an essential picture of fascism that is developing in America with tremendous consequence for the world. And it's characteristic of and parallels the development of fascism in other countries. But the essential paragraph, which we can get into more and respond to your questions, is that fascism, yes, is the same system as rules ordinarily in a country like this. It is a capitalist imperialist system. Fascism does not get rid of capitalism. It is a different form of rule of capitalism. So all the predatory things that capitalism does, the way it sets people against each other, countries against each other, all those things maintain under fascism, but they become more intense. And the means of changing it become limited as the government becomes more openly a dictatorship, which means the rule in the interests of that. And you can already see this developing with the Trump-Pence regime. It's not that life was a picnic before, and all too many leftists, I just have to say, if they even have that terminology applied to them, have said, "Oh, we've always had fascism here. It's all the same thing." And I just have to say, as a revolutionary communist, it's not news to either of us that this country has a history and is founded in genocide and slavery, and the exploitation of generations of immigrants from all through the 19th century into the 20th century. But there is a qualitative difference between the way that system has been ruled over the last 200 years and fascism itself. It's a qualitative difference in the ability of people to even have some say, to have some civil liberties, and to be able to not be under the thumb of an arbitrary power. In many ways, the power that we've seen is obviously disproportionately discriminates and incarcerates and brutalizes people of color. That's been true. It's not new. Even today, people talk about one last little fact here, that the 700,000 people are going to be thrown off food stamps. How are they going to be thrown off? Well, the actual law they're going to be thrown off under was passed by Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Some of you are too young to remember that. He passed that law, but then the states, or some states, passed got waivers to not apply the law. All Trump is doing is taking the waiver off. But in other words, this is a Clinton bill, yet that he's arbitrarily taking the waiver off, and it's the opening door to actually eliminating food stamps for another 3 million people, indicates the direction of where things where things actually are going. So what I'd like to do is stop here and take some questions from the audience here, and look at some of the questions on the screen. Maybe you can see them.
Yeah, I
better.
would just encourage, I think when you were speaking, people, I get the impression positively that people were listening and not typing. But now if you're out there watching on Facebook as well as on Zoom, please type in questions that you have about what Andy just presented, and we'll incorporate some of them. But I think maybe we should start with the people.
We'll start with the audience. Yeah, I mean, somebody did write in, Jesus, we're effed. But okay, yeah, I guess that is a conclusion you could draw, but it's the wrong conclusion. We could be, but whether or not we are effed depends on what we do. And
Also,
there is no other organization that's proposed that. So let's get it. We had a question right in the front row.
Real quick before that, if you are tuned in on conference call, I forgot to mention this. If you're on conference call and you want to send in a question, you could email info@refusefascism.org, info@refusefascism.org, and they'll bring us the question, or text 917-407-1286. That's 917-407-1286 to text a question. But we'll start up front.
When you ask questions in the audience, I'm going to repeat the question. So I may stop you in the middle just so because I won't remember the whole thing. Oh, it's a short question. Okay.
What happens when the 700,000 people get off? Do they just go out on the street and starve and lie there dead? I mean, what does the government do about them?
So the question is, what about the 700,000 people who are going to be thrown off food stamps?
Yeah.
Do they just go out in the street and starve or die? What's going to be done about them? Well, I think one is it's not actually I think they don't actually care about these people. I mean, I think there's a view that there's a whole section of people who are expendable. This has to do with some more structural things and changes in the development of capitalism where they no longer need a whole surplus population in this country the way they have in the past. And I think they are trying to close the door. On the one hand, the wall on the border, whether it's the actual wall which he wants to build, or it's a wall that's basically armed militia that locks people up. But I think in terms of the homeless and the people, and first of all, this actually hits the people who this mainly hits. This is a bigger discussion on this food stamp thing. Are people who are in and out of work. That's who's going to be most affected by this.
Children.
People who and their children. People who they might get 4 months of work, then they're out of work, and there's a whole work requirement in this thing. It's part of what Bill Clinton was involved with, is ending welfare as we know it, and we can't just keep people around. But I think to answer your question is, one, I don't think they give a damn, but they'd like to eliminate these people one way or the other. And so you do have a situation right now of extremely desperate people. I don't think we've seen the kind of thing that could actually happen where people are dying in the streets kind of deal. We already have seen.
Pick up the slack? The cities, the mayors, wouldn't they pick up the governments? Wouldn't they pick up the slack?
This is explicitly what she asked. Will the cities and the mayors and the governors pick up the slack? And this is explicitly what Trump is banning. He is actually taking action to prevent states from picking up the slack on this. And I know I'm interjecting, but honestly, when the crime bill, when the welfare as we know it was first ended and a whole spate of people were thrown off food stamps, you asked what did people do? A lot of women went into prostitution. A lot of people did a lot of very degrading things to feed their children, to put food on the table. A lot of people went into petty crime and hustles. And a lot of them then got fed into the other thing that got passed at the same time, the massive crime bill. They got fed into mass incarceration. People get ground up and spit out.
I think look, this is the future. And then if you get outside even of America and think of what we're doing around the world, the devastation of climate, also the intervention in other countries, everybody's got to pay their share kind of deal. You're going to see, and you're seeing it right now. 2 or 3 years ago, there were 65 million refugees. So what you're looking at is a world that's a gated world, the gated north, keeping out the people from the south, expelling them, and then having camps and all kinds of means to control this population that to them is surplus. But to us, no human being is surplus and no human being is illegal. But under this system it is, and ruled by fascists, then this can be enforced in ways that are horrific. Look, you see, here's an interesting thing in your question, because a lot of times everybody doesn't like Trump, called Mexicans rapists. He said, these are very bad people. Tells the cops, don't be nice to these people. There's very bad people. He calls his enemies in the ruling class scum, all these kinds of vermin. But see, these words are not just words. They're actually a strong opinion. It comes very naturally to him, but there's a section of people in power who feel that a large percentage of the population in this country is vermin, and they're ruining their country, and they've mobilized a base of people through their alternative reality, Fox News and their fascist news network, who believe this and who are clinging on to that little bit of privilege and a vision, an imaginary one, and it doesn't really matter that it's imaginary if they believe it, that they're prepared to act to have this white Christian America, which they think will correspond to their interests, when in fact, it doesn't. And this is something that the liberals can't understand, that they're trying to play by rules and by norms that don't actually have any meaning to the people who are actually mobilized to defeat them. You had a question over there.
Actually, really quick, no, I wanted to add on a little bit to what you said about the language that he uses. Them, others, vermin, but yet white nationalists at Charlottesville are fine people.
Right. The point, if the people couldn't hear that, the point was that the other side of the derogatory language, the vermin, the bad people, is that the fascists in Charlottesville were some fine people. Okay, we have a question there?
We have a few really good questions coming in on Facebook Live, and I was going to pick this one. Things are so horrible now. What does it mean to have fascism consolidate? What does this look like? Is there any way to stop it if it does consolidate?
It doesn't look pretty. And yes, there is a way. It's a long shot, but there's a way. Look, I don't mean to make light of this. If fascism actually consolidates, which it's on the road to, I mean, that's something that people have to get. This is not, they have a lot of initiative. They have a lot of initiative. And when it consolidates, when you get to the point where I mean, already you see norms shattering in Congress. He's refusing to participate in the impeachment process. He says that it's just because it doesn't matter to him that it's in the Constitution. In fact, he thinks that should all be changed. Now, whether or not, however much Trump has even read the damn document, it's not that long, but I'm sure he hasn't read it. But that's immaterial. There are people there in power, and this is where these speeches by Barr and Pompeo, and then people who are more theoretical about this, like Steve Bannon and some of these Christian fascist theorists. These are important, there's a lot of statement there of a different way of ruling, which is much more a unitary executive, okay? In other words, basically things are decided by the president, and even who can vote, all this kind of thing gets down to a very, very tightly controlled society with extremely high penalty for any dissent. The governing norms will be different, and this can happen. It's happened all over the world, and it can become too late. So in terms of what it will look like, it'll look like, and then they have a program. Whether literally there are handmaids in red robes and white bonnets, I don't know. But you are going to a situation where compulsory motherhood is actually part of the program. It's part of the program. And you're in a situation where the police are completely unleashed. And you can walk through the entire thing, which you don't have the time to do. And there's also a militarization of the whole society. Now, bringing military equipment into the police forces is not something brand new. Obama did a lot of that too. But the level at which the police forces will be militarized, and you can even see right now a purging, if you will, of the intelligence agencies and of the military, of getting people in there whose allegiance is to Trump and to his policies and not to the rule of law. That's the significance in the past couple of weeks of Trump overruling the few Navy SEALs who were actually prosecuted for war crimes. He just vacated their sentences. And the military, or sections of the military, were very upset about this because they understand that from their perspective in battle, which they commit all kinds of horrific crimes that aren't ever prosecuted, like, you know, the previous defense secretary, James Mattis, didn't get the nickname Mad Dog for no reason at all. And in fact, he lived up to it in Fallujah in the Iraq War, where he ordered white phosphorus gas, which is a war crime in its own right, to be rained down on the people of that major city in Iraq. But nonetheless, when you have situations of just blatant torture, outright murder of civilians and of prisoners, you can't win the hearts and minds of people very well with that kind of thing. And that Trump overrode that, see, is a very significant step. It's saying what I do goes. And then when he was the Secretary of the Navy, which is a top military person, this is not a progressive guy, right? When he objected to that, he was fired. So you can see what, in terms of this question, what does fascism looks like? It gets to the consolidation of power in the hands of a fascist cabal and a fascist leader. In terms of the second part of the question is, what could we do about it? There's only one thing we can do about it. It's a very hard road to go. It's a long shot, but it's the only real shot. And that is to bring ultimately millions of people in the streets in sustained protest. That's what Refuse Fascism is calling for. You have lots of people applauding what's going on in Lebanon, Chile, Hong Kong, Puerto Rico, all around the world when people are doing the same thing, but they're not yet willing to do that here. They've not moved into the streets here because they are hoping or ignoring and believing that an easier road exists. I would say there is not an easier road. We've done a lot of work on this. And I invite you all to watch one of the key resources on the website, refusefascism.org, is a film by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian called "The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go in the Name of Humanity. We refuse to accept the fascist America. A better world is possible." And this is, as somebody who's read not all the books, but a number of books on fascism and fascism in America, this is, in 1 hour and 8 minutes, one of the most concise, coherent, and sharpest analysis of an American fascism. You know, there's all kinds of good books out there. There's a new one by a guy who used to be the legal director of the ACLU, which that has like how separation of church and state is being torn up. He has 20 ways that Trump parallels Hitler in terms of language. But none of this actually gets at what the core of this American fascism and how a demagogue like Trump has found himself been able to get to the head of this. And it has a lot to do with that arranged marriage between Trump and the Christian fascists, with Mike Pence being put in as vice president as the cement on that deal. And that's why, you know, all these judges who've been appointed under the Trump-Pence regime are people vetted by the fascistic Federalist Society, conservative judicial group, and are, even within that framework, are ones who would implement the Christian fascist program. And so this is what you see in that film. So the only way to really dislodge a regime that's willing to rip up the rule of law, including elections themselves, is by the people taking independent action. And this is going to be a tremendous struggle. We're trying to start it week after week, which is what they began in Hong Kong, but actually in Hong Kong, it's almost every day in different ways and preparing for the weekend. That's what it's going to be. And it's not going to be without cost, which is part of the reason why, you know, people have not moved forward, even though they don't fully understand it. They get that it's pathetic if people really think all that's involved is giving up 2 hours of a Saturday afternoon where they could be shopping or sitting in front of the TV. I think there's a lot of that, but I think on another level, it's a big, big level of denial that has some recognition deep inside those thick heads of people that this is going to be a big struggle. And they're looking at that and say, wow, that is like a big abyss. Maybe this will blow over. Maybe something will happen. And then it becomes too late. This is very important because we here you know, we were just saying to Sansara that we were in a meeting, we said, what are we going to do? We have to have a name for December. And so I can often get into alliteration. Well, December disruptions. That sounds good. And then the more we talked about it, it says, oh yeah, that is what's needed. We need to disrupt this development of fascism and the development of the accommodation and conciliation and collaboration with it, and the willful blindness of too many people. And so this is, we're going to get into this very shortly, but there's no other way that has the potential, in my opinion, of actually driving this out. And I you know, we don't have the time. I could even make that case that for some reason, Trump was gone from the scene. You still would have this fascist movement of 30 million people. You would still have the fascist forces who are behind this, these very powerful people who haven't been in power, but who actually think this is a very good thing, right? Who are backing this. It's not just Trump, it's not Trump's own money. This is other people backing him. And you still have this whole fascist structure through all the state governments, the federal government, the Congress. If you haven't gotten the picture yet that the Republican Party is totally hollowed out to be a fascist party, I don't know what you need. I guess they'd have to come in brown shirts for you, but you know, you can be a fascist in a suit and tie too. Okay, so this is what we're facing, and the only way you're going to dislodge that is to have the kind of political crisis from below where other sections of people in power feel like the survival of their system is at stake, and for that reason, they remove this regime and try to then put their whole package back together at a point where they feel it could unravel because the masses of the people are so angry at what has been done, and there's no other way to placate them, which is what happens in these other countries. But it hasn't happened here, and it needs to happen here. That's what we're calling for, not because we want to have some just for the hell of it. I mean, we're putting ourselves at, you know, ourselves personally at some risk, but it's not about us, and it's not about you to the people who are watching this. It's about humanity. And there come times in human history when people have to stand up and say, basta, yeah, enough. We're drawing the line here. We make a stand. This doesn't pass. But we have to be honest, right now it is. And we've still got time to stop this, but we don't have a lot of time. And the other trick of all this is we don't know how much time we have. See, that's another thing that comes up. So let's see if there's another question. And then where are we at on time here?
Here, I wrote you a note.
We have 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, let's see
Okay.
what we can do with it. I mean, before we have to talk about some of the plans and
We do.
bring that more into focus too. But I just wanted to mention, I think it's embedded in what you said, but the questioner asked explicitly, and maybe it's worth it to just put the pieces together. What is there any way to stop fascism if it does consolidate? And I think I just wanted to make it explicit. The whole point is if it consolidates, that space in society to stand up is essentially terrorized out of existence. And so, you know, you can't make an absolute out of anything. World events could interfere, but the moment to stop fascism is before it consolidates. That's everything he was saying. I just wanted to really connect that to the way the question was posed. It's not what do you do if it gets that bad? It's what do you do now, because you can see it will get that bad if we don't go and move people to act to stop it. So who's got
Just
a
one
comment?
thing on this.
A
Is there
question?
any way
Yeah.
to stop if it does consolidate?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, we will have to cross that bridge when we come to it. In most cases, historically, it's mainly been stopped by outside forces, such as wars. Have been the principal way that Germany and Italy were defeated in World War II. That is how that stopped. Other countries, it has persisted for decades, and then there were changes in the world situation and within the country, and that eventually led to a change. But then the roots of it weren't actually dug up, but mainly it has to be. It's very difficult to dislodge it from within, and certainly you don't dislodge it at that point on the basis of people lawfully taking to the street in nonviolent protests. That the ability to do that or to vote them out is going to largely be taken away. Even as people will vote, fascism almost always comes to power, almost always through legitimate means, through voting. But then that becomes actually the last legitimate election even as elections consider. You see this in Germany, where he barely wins. In fact, he was the largest minority party. But then within a few years, the elections were rigged in such a way that Hitler starts winning 80 and 90% of the vote. Without any opposition, of course, it makes it a little easier to get, or any substantial opposition. So do we want to do one more quick question, or do you want to move on to the next part of the program?
I think if would be good. I know we have a good group here, and we have a couple more good questions on the screen, but especially if people have things that they want to raise in the room, especially if you've been taking this movement out to others that you know. What are you running into? What are you challenged by? And especially if you're like newer to this movement, I want to invite you to raise your hand. I mean, you don't have to be newer to raise your hand if you've got a question too, but otherwise I'll take one on the screen. Oh, we got 1, 2, let's hear them both and see what you want to do. We'll do the challenge. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to see if you guys can ask them, because, okay, what do they need? What do we need to tell them, show them, whoever's still hesitant about taking up the cause?
Mm-hmm.
Can you posit the question to them? What is stopping you personally?
Okay.
What is it? And how can we get you into the streets?
Okay, we will share that. They may have heard it, but we'll share it too. Go ahead.
Well, I had a question, and I wanted to comment on this thing about the denial, because I think that's a big part of what we're up against is, and and trying to disrupt the denial that this is happening at all, because people have their heads in their sand and they're not paying attention to what's happening, thinking that somehow locally it's not going to get that bad, or like, here in New York City, this is one thing, we've heard is like, oh, well, it's a progressive city. As long as we keep like the fascist base out, it's not really going to affect us. Those kinds of things. I just think that thing of the denial. And my question is what's the relationship between the December's disruptions and disrupting the denial?
That's a great segue question.
Okay, so both of these are segues into the next part of the agenda. Maybe we should do that. And I just want to invite people to, continue to discuss the analysis that's in the call to go watch the film that I mentioned. There's a talk that I gave on, I think, September 28th. It's on the website that introduces this campaign that has a lot of, I would call polemics towards the end, at all the things that people say to us that basically is, it's not really fascism, it's not really that bad, and all this kind of stuff. That's valuable. There's other articles that address specific questions on that website that would be important to do. And the address that Sansara gave, info at
refusefascism.org. Info at refusefascism.org.
You can, and I encourage people to write in your questions, whether you've been leading a chapter for the last 3 years or you got involved 2 hours ago when somebody handed you a leaflet. If you have a question, send it in, because that's actually part of how we're going to change minds and also improve the website itself.
I want to do a lightning round response, because we did get a few things that we didn't respond to. Now it moved. Somebody said, I'm concerned about the fragmentation of groups unintentionally reflecting the regime's divide and conquer. What can we do to facilitate a more cohesive front? And this echoes somebody writes a similar question. In my opinion, we need all groups fighting fascism, climate change, gun violence, Women's March, need to impeach, Black Lives Matter, Vote Latina, LBC, Indigenous rights, Native Americans, color of change. They go on, all united. And I guess I want to give a 20-second response. And we need to keep talking about this where we are. But the essential thing that is going to get people to come together and demand out now, which is the single unifying demand, is that people have to confront the catastrophe of what happens if we don't. Don't get with this movement because Andy's a good guy and he says so, and I'm a great person, I say so, or this so-and-so said. It's not our thing. This is objectively what humanity is facing. And if people see that, there is no winning rights for any of these issues or causes as just and as important as they are if fascism consolidates. And so all of us, bring your banner. for Black Lives Matter. Bring your banner for abortion rights. Bring your demands around immigrants. Bring whatever it is that drives you, keeps you up at night, and all of the above, and bring it into the streets December 14th with the Trump Pence must go now, out now, single unifying demand. Join this movement, take it up in your own way, and come together at these convergences, because really what's going to drive us to come together is the reality if we confront it.
You know, that's right. One thing that this question reflects is not understanding what it is needs to be done. If anybody, even in Refuse Fascism, thinks that we are going to organize every group as part of Refuse Fascism and grow to where we have the millions, that's not the vision here. It's getting everybody out there with your own group. It's going to be a big thing. Everybody's going to come out. We're not trying, that's why Refuse Fascism initiated the OutNow movement. And we've talked with some other groups that have come in, and we've met with them, and people have different ways they think impeachment should be done. So do we. People have different principles they want to assert. People have different particular issues they're concerned with. What we're saying to everybody is, look, there's one demand: Trump, Pence out now. Some of us would like to see Bernie be president. Others would like to see Elizabeth Warren president. Other people would like to see an anarchist future. Other people would like to see
the whole system brought down and replaced.
Yeah, that would be us, right?
Yeah.
We have a idea for what that would be. But the point, people have many different agendas about how they see a better world. None of that comes to pass, as Sarah said, without this. But the actual conception of what we're talking about is not a traditional protest of this group calls it. They form a coalition. We spend 2 months hammering out the program, 6 months organizing. Everybody comes out, everybody goes home. The world stays the same. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people in this country and many different organizations. And even if you took all the organizations, it doesn't get close to the number of people who need to be out. People need to be coming out, and then there'll have to be support, food, medical, legal, all kinds of things. But this is calling for a big upsurge in society that people haven't seen in decades in this country. Maybe you got a little hint of something beyond a group's control with the Women's March, you know, on the actual day when there was all kinds of people. The first one. But that's not what we're calling for. So people, if you want these other groups and your group to be part, tell them to get out there. Come with your own demands. You know, but the basic unifying thing is Trump, Pence out now. And then we can even argue about how that's going to happen exactly. We would say it's not going to happen without people being in the streets. It's not happening by just organizing and polling people and waiting for the election. Because I'll tell you what, A, he could win, and B, if he loses by a small margin, he probably will not go. He'll claim it's illegitimate, and this will get protracted. And if you won't come out now, we've posed this question: what will you do then? Is that when you'll come out? I don't think so. If you're not coming out now, you won't come out then either, or at least not come out with the kind of resoluteness you'll need if he's prepared to defy the results of an election with his army and all that. Just don't forget, he commands the army, you don't.
So, all right, go for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
The people that started the Women's March after Trump was elected are having another march on, I think, the eve of the impeachment.
Yeah.
And how can we go to that and make our influence?
Yeah.
Get our influence into that injection.
Okay, so the question is, the people who organized the Women's March, and actually a bunch of other groups, have also called for mass protests the night before the impeachment vote. And how can we go into that and have our voice be an influence in that protest? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
And
Okay.
they're calling protest on the inauguration.
Okay, so what I want to address that, but I want to shift us to our whole December disruptions. And I'll address that in that context, and we'll address it together. But I think this last point about we need to disrupt. We actually have to disrupt. We are the people. Everybody tuned in, everybody that you are organizing and working with, and those who are kind of with you, but maybe unsure, we have to grab them, put our arms around them, and we have to go out throughout December and really become a force in society in big ways and small ways that disrupts the normalization, that disrupts and confronts the fascism. Our Philly chapter is going out to Hershey, Pennsylvania in a couple days to stand up against Trump's rally there, joining counter protests. That's really important. There was protests against Ann Coulter at Berkeley recently, which was a couple thousand students. It was very important. We need to do that kind of thing, standing up against the fascism and waking people up, but we also need to, and we have to be honest, this is something that often people are even more resistant to doing. We have to go out and challenge the people who claim they don't like Trump and Pence, and who actually really don't like Trump and Pence, but are learning to live with them, who are actually learning to turn their backs on the children in those cages. Because that's what it is. Who are turning their backs on what's happening to the world, who are turning their backs on it and living a life that's compartmentalized, that's self-absorbed, that's tuning it out. And I had somebody tell me recently, it's just too much to look at. I couldn't get up in the morning if I did. Well, you know what? It's happening, whether you look at it or not. And we've got to go out. These are good people. Many of them are, they have a good side for sure. We have to go out and we have to challenge them and we have to move them. So the idea of December disruptions includes going to the fascists and taking that on and taking on the crimes at key junctures, but it also includes going out to people in the highways and byways and disrupting the calm, disturbing the air, disrupting the normalization, and sharply challenging people to pick a side. So the centerpiece I want to repeat is December 14th. We're calling mass protests because yes, we began 5 weeks, we had a certain momentum on a small scale, but very precious if we keep going and if we scale it up. So December 14th, we are coming back in the streets and we need to have protests that are double or triple the size of the protests that we had at the peak of our 5-week launch. We need to call hundreds of people out in the major cities. We need to have thousands of people across the country who are coming and manifesting Trump, Pence out now. And these protests need to be bigger in size. They need to have a broader diversity of voices and breadth of people represented at them. And they should, in some places, involve people doing things that disrupt. And we had recently, there was trials of people in Los Angeles who went down and shut down the 101 freeway, saying Trump, Pence must go. If people are moved to do civil disobedience that brings business as usual to a halt, that kind of thing is needed. We're not mandating that, but this kind of thing needs to go on. People need to put something on the line, and we have to model that, and we have to challenge people to confront the stakes in a way that they don't. If you're just, hey, take our flyer. You know, we have to go out there and put it on the line like it matters, both with our massive numbers on the 14th and in something that really shakes up the holiday season and says there is no Santa Claus. It's on us to drive out Trump and Pence. And if you want to bring joy to the children of the world in this holiday season, you need to get your butt in the streets and bring people with you and say they must go. So that's number one, is the December 14th. It's the centerpiece. This Saturday, we're having a day of mass roving protest on mass transit. This is not a day of mass flyering and getting the word out alone, although we will be flyering and getting the word out. This is a day for everybody to gather up. We had here in New York City, 70 people come to the mass organizing meeting. It would be really good if we got 70 or 80 people to come meet up and go on the trains and go as a protest, a mass protest, disturbing the calm, roving through, chanting, distributing flyers, holding on-the-spot rallies throughout the transit system, and really becoming something that's turning heads and saying, no, this is what you need to be about. And that's building momentum for December 14th across the country. In Los Angeles, there's train systems. In Chicago, there's train systems. Other places, you know, some places they have that, some places they don't. You might go on buses, you might go to a busy transit hub, you might do a car caravan, but some way where you're going on a mass scale with a roving protest, getting the word out. If you're a car caravan, you can put a loudspeaker on your roof. You could decorate your cars and you could go through neighborhoods and spread the word. There's all kinds of things people can do to get the word out. But But the idea is you're actually bringing people together, and you're taking, it's not a protest that stays self-contained and people can walk by and join or not join. You're going into people's space, and you're bringing this demand, and you're demanding that they pick a side and join you. And you're getting the word out, and you're getting this on social media, and you're gaining momentum, but you're also training. You're on the trains, you're training on the trains, and you're training a movement of people. We just got a comment that reflects a lot of what we've heard from many people who said, here in my city, people are denying and putting their heads in the sand. Speaking in public is scary to some people, and we need training in my city. They go on to say, I totally believe your organization is most important. I'm trying to convince my friends and family. Thank you. But this thing of it's scary to go out and people are in denial, this is the idea of a mass protest on the mass transit together. And you're training people to go out and disturb the air, not one by one, not by themselves when it's scary, but in a big group when you're together, and you're learning how to set terms in a different way and be bold with this and challenge people. And you're building momentum. So those two things I really want to emphasize as key. And it's Thursday, there's time for people to get it together, chants and plans and Facebook meetups so that everybody is invited in. But this should really be, it should be a lot of fun. It should be very exciting. People can cover themselves with stickers and be a big scene and gather people to join them. I see people in the room are very excited about the sticker thing. We have these stickers. You could be head to toe in the stickers. We have t-shirts online at the OutNow store. And then December 14th, mass protests. And these need to be getting on the radio. They need to be getting posters up around town. They need to be getting announcements all over the place. December 7th is not the only day to build for the 14th, by the way. Two more things I want to say, and then we'll see if we have a little room for questions in the room, or if we take that after we turn off the live stream. But then there needs to be a lot of things that are unplanned, that are not part of the national 2 nodal points. You know, flash mobs in shopping malls, civil disobedience on freeways or other things, banner drops that really capture the imagination and people's attention, different ways that the word gets out. People really do we need to go all over the place and disturb the calm. And there's many gatherings, many places that this could be done. We should have some friendly competition around the country, frankly, of people doing different audacious things, sharing it on social media, getting it promoted on the refusefascism.org website, and inspiring other people to do the same. And if you do something that really stands out and stands up to this and shakes other people, and don't be afraid if some people are offended. Coco Das wrote a really good piece. We went on the trains here in New York one day. During our Saturday protest, there was about 40 or 50 of us on the train. And some guy says, nobody hates Trump more than me, but you guys don't need to be in my space right now. And you know what? You're going to run into some of that. She wrote a really good response to that. It's on refusefascism.org. There were also people who were really inspired. But we have to, she said, it's not about how much you hate him. It's about how much you've adjusted to his crimes. That's what we're out there disturbing and challenging. So you're going to run into good, you're going to run into bad, you're going to run into Trump people, you're going to figure out how to take that on together. But if you capture this on social media and have really struck a chord, it's going to inspire other people around the country. And there are people out there who are hungry for something like this. And then there's more that we're going to wake up through this month of disturbing them into their sanity and morality again. So I wanted to mention that. And then the final point I wanted to make is to Lillian's question about the impeachment protests. We do need to go and be part of these protests the night before the impeachment vote. And we need to go in and bring in the message of Trump, Pence out now. And in our flyer for December disruptions, it makes very clear that the impeachments are a very momentous thing. And there's a lot that's being revealed that actually gets at elements of Trump's fascism. But the terms on which these impeachment is being fought by the Democrats is very narrow and leaves the majority of the fascist program intact. And this was clear again today when Nancy Pelosi spoke. When she came back to the podium after being challenged by some fascist journalist about does she hate Trump, and she came back to the podium and she said, well, I think Trump's a coward for not acting gun control. I think he's heartless to the dreamers. Never mind, the Democrats have been heartless to the dreamers as well.
Yep.
I think that he's been irresponsible on climate change. Never mind all the conciliation, collaboration the Democrats have done on that. She goes, but that is for the elections, not for the impeachment. Well, this is the basis on which Trump, Pence need to be removed. So we need to bring that message in, and that's only going to come from the people, not from the Democrats. Not from the impeachment on its own terms. That's going to come because we go in the streets and sustain that protest. And this is why we have to go into these protests that Move On, Indivisible, Women's March are doing the night before the impeachment vote. But we better be very clear that the most important thing we're doing this month and going forward is building the movement to drive this regime out through sustained mass nonviolent protests, not through bringing this message into other protests. We're going there to wake people up and divert them to join in the movement to drive out, not to just be a radical left edge of a protest that doesn't ultimately go anywhere. So it's important. It's very important. There's going to be people who really care who come out to this. We have to be there, but we have to be there on a mission to build the movement for OutNow. And people can come into that with very different views. They can come into that as who they are, but they have to come into a movement to drive the regime out, not to give backing or do a one-off hope and prayer that the Democrats will do something they promise they won't do, which is to stop this fascist nightmare. So those are the things I wanted to say. Do you want to add anything about the month?
Just a couple of things. One, all right, let me just pose this. We need to really work hard over the next 10 days so that there are hundreds of people out in the big cities on the 14th. Mm-hmm. And I want to say a few things in a second about how we're going to get those hundreds. I don't know if we're on track to get them or not. And that would be a few thousand nationally. But it might occur to somebody, well, okay, that's what you're getting, but that's not hundreds of thousands of people. That's not tens of thousands of people. There'll probably be more people out at the impeachment rally. I mean, there may or may not be. Actually, some of these impeachment rallies we've gone to expecting thousands of people and find out we're the only people there. That's happened many times, but over the last couple of years. But let's hope that that's not the case now. I would love to be in a rally for the impeachment, refuse fascism to be there, and there to be actually thousands of people. That would be fine. So what difference does it make if we get hundreds of people out? Well, it makes this difference. We're bringing the message of how this could actually be driven out. Mm-hmm. We're going there with what the problem is that people are actually facing, which is a fascist regime that has catastrophic implications for humanity. We're going there to bring forward people now who will become the backbone of an organization that will be able to take this where it needs to go. Now we can't, we do have to go out there and struggle with people and do all kinds of actions to inspire people to get out into the streets. But you need a group of people who are determined to see this through. And the thing that's agonizing right now is that most of the people, and it's what happens always, is we'll take the course of least resistance. The problem when you're dealing with fascism is it can become too late. And so we're trying to both accelerate that process, but also when people are ready to move, that there's the ability and understanding of how to actually cohere that into a movement that's determined that the entire regime must go and doesn't settle at making their point heard. Because our point will not count if fascism succeeds. They will not say, oh, well, you guys made a good point back then, but we won, and so why don't you just come along? That's not how these fascists are going to do, okay? So you have to understand that the importance of building December 14th is, first off, things could happen this week and they could be very mass on the 14th. But if they're not, they have to be much larger than what we've done. So here's where it comes with what do we need to do? On these protests this weekend, because for various reasons, we've been doing a number of things in the national office and the editorial board. The idea was that in cities, and I don't even know if this is happening in New York, that people would call, for example, start at Santa Monica, which is all the way on the west side. They would of LA. or start in the end of the red line in
You're talking about
Boston.
the 7th? Or
The 7th now I'm talking about. I'm talking about in 2 days. And you would actually call rallies at different stops. If we start in Brooklyn, we'll have another rally at Union Square, another rally at Columbus Circle, and end up in the Bronx. And that people will know where we're going to be. And you're going as a group. You're not just, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go leaflet in the subways. It's not going to be going to leaflet in the subways. It's going to be bringing a march into the train. You go into one car, you get to the next station, or you probably, hopefully, could be in 3 cars at a time. Then you jump out and get to the next 3 cars. And you go a bunch of stations, and then you go out to this, you get out to the street, and you hold a rally in the street and call people to come down into the subway with you. It should be very disruptive to the normal routine and thinking of people. But it's a rally. It's got creative banners. It's got things that people themselves can take out. This is a way to shake up things and to actually reach, you know, literally in New York and Chicago, tens of thousands of people, in LA, thousands of people.
Let me interject one thing that I neglected to say, and I don't want it to get left out. And shaking the bucket everywhere you go and raising money. No, it actually should be mass fundraising woven into this. Keep going.
And then,
yeah.
So all right, and a lot of us will point to the following Saturday, the 14th.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. We talk about organizations, and Sansara read the names of all these different groups here. If you know people in those groups, if you know the leaders of those groups, go talk to them. Tell them they're invited. They can speak at it. This is not something we're trying to own. We're trying to actually remove a regime. But don't just be thinking about the traditional or the impeachment organizations. What about the progressive synagogues, the mosques, the churches on Sunday? Are there plans in every city to go out to them? Do we know who the progressive congregations are in your city? Go talk to them. We have a religious task force. I know a lot of schools are now on exam week in the colleges. Can we go out to them this week? Call people up. We've got to go organize. We do need the 250 people who came to the meetings to go out and organize. As for the impeachment groups, the different organizations who are trying to push the Democrats harder or cheerlead them, depending on which group it is. Some are trying to push very hard, including agreeing with what they themselves are thinking about. This is too narrow grounds for impeachment. They should be out here. They can bring, I'll say this by the people, bring your 5-point program to out to these streets, and we'll come out to your demonstration the following week. We have to get over ourselves and get into the streets and do what needs to be done. You don't want some future generations reading a thing, well, fascism is coming to America, but such and such group of 300 people was nervous about another group that had 500 people. What were these people thinking about? Why weren't they thinking about humanity? So but you have to go struggle with people about this, because it's not how people look at it. Everything in this thing everybody's branded. Every organization is branded. Everybody thinks of their relations with each other as commodities. This has to stop.
Yeah.
There's too much at stake for this kind of pettiness. So this is what we have to do. But the 14th will not be any different than last month if the people who are watching this webinar don't change what they do over the next 10 days. Okay? And if you just think we're going to get a couple teams of 6 people here and 10 people there and go out on the trains and futz around in some office or church basement to get our signs together, that's not what we were talking about for the 7th. I don't mean to be harsh on people, but I'm saying let's really shake things up and make the trains exciting instead of boring. Get people or fearful, right? Let's liberate the trains, okay? And so no, that's what it should be. It should feel like you can get there, right, and go down, go through the turnstiles and say, we're here to liberate the subways. We're here to liberate the L, and up and down, and we should raise enough money to buy whatever the cards are to get in and pay the fare. We're not encouraging people to jump turnstiles. We should pay the fare. The organizers should have enough so that people can join. But let's have a blast, and let's really blast away all the delusions and illusions that people have. So that I want to say about this Saturday, and then next week, Sansara laid it out, but it does have to be bigger, and you have to be pointing to where we're
Yeah.
going. See, in and of itself, it's significant, but not that significant. It's significance in terms of trying to spark and to build up a force and an understanding of what it's going to take to get rid of this tremendous horror that's looming. Last point is for the people who are involved. Look, we should take your hats off to the people in Never Again and to these lawyers who are down on the border, people fighting around this immigration thing. This is righteous what people are fighting, but we do have to say that whatever progress you're able to make, if this regime consolidates, everything you've done has been washed away. So because I care about the immigrants or the DACAs, since I believe Trump, Pence out now, and then go back to be in front of the ICE Center the next day and next week and continue representing people. And the same thing for every social movement. Come to this, organize your forces and bring your demands and bring your understanding of that particularity of whatever it is you're fighting and bring it to the rally and speak about it, because we all need to learn from that too.
We are gonna, we'll stay for the studio audience who has their hands up. I'm gonna take 2 minutes to close out for everybody watching online. Andy said, take your hats off to various people. I agree. You also should put your hat on.
Yes.
Trump Pence out now, the new beanies. You should order a hat. You should order lots of hats. You should wear them. How much are the hats? $15. $15 you can get this hat. For $150 you could get, I probably could get more than 10 and sell them and raise money. So that's one thing. Get your hat. Stickers, also very important. Buttons, very important. And shirts online right now at refusefascism.org, the No shop. You can order shirts, hoodies, long sleeve shirts. They're very nice. We're also going to have them, I believe, tomorrow here in New York for people, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yes, okay. And people in other areas can order bulk. That'd be very good to get them out as a fundraiser and to represent. You're a force out there wearing the matching shirts, wearing stickers head to toe. And Andy looks good for a webinar with one sticker on, but when you go on the trains, you should wear like 30 stickers each. So you are like a spectacle. You're like, a mob of 30 people with head to toe stickers and lots of things, and you're stickering up other people and you're getting people to join you, and it's over the top and it's contagious. Okay, so that's one thing. But last thing is, in addition to these items, I want to thank the people who donated. We raised $5,000, over $5,000 on Giving Tuesday. Over 60 people donated. It's really important. It's really important. We can't do anything without funds. And I shouldn't have saved it to the end of the webinar, but we can't do anything without funds. And giving money is one of the most important ways to join this movement, to be a meaningful part of spreading this. And raising money is one of the most important ways of networking and bringing new people into this movement. When you ask them to give, you're asking them to take a stand and make a commitment and join a community that is taking a stand against this and driving it out. And sustain us. Thank you. And sustain a monthly donation. These are things that really, we should ask those that we know, that we love, that we meet on the street to donate on the spot. On this Saturday, we should shake the can everywhere. That means ask for donations, have big donation buckets, but we should also be signing people up and calling them and saying, can you sustain at $25 a month? Can you give $100? Can you pay for the bulk order of t-shirts for our chapter? Can you rent the sound and the stage for the next protest? There are people that you're meeting who can give more money. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $100,000. A lot of people are very disturbed by what's happening and have some sense, especially people who have resources, have some sense of what it takes, the resources it takes to actually reach people and move people. So ask them to donate, and if you need help, if there's somebody that can make a significant donation and you want to put them in touch with the fundraising team to talk to them and have that conversation, write to info@refusefascism and at info@refusefascism.org. This last month of the year, it's overwhelmingly the biggest time of donations. because people are thinking about what kind of world they want. They're reflecting on the moment, the year, what it means, what the future is, and because people have their tax, whatever they're trying to sort out. And we need to ask everywhere we go. We need to raise $100,000. This is what is required, and we've gotten a certain distance. I don't actually know the number off the top of my head where we're at, but we're not halfway. We've got a long distance to go, and this is the time to do it. So we have to build this into our plans. And if you're watching and you can make a donation, donate at refusefascism.org. There was something for Venmo, it's at refuse-fascism. The beanie is $15. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here in the room. Next week, we will be back, and it'll be back to Wednesdays. Every week from now on, we'll be back to Wednesdays. So thanks a lot. Yep, same time.